Dragon Radio. I'm your host, M.L.Ruscsak. I'm here with special guest, Kevin Boyle. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me today.
Now, you didn't start off as an author. So what was your career path to lead you into writing?
Okay. My career path has been very varied. I went to law school at nighttime. And during law school, I was a high school gym teacher and a high school track coach because I went to night school. And I absolutely loved it. I loved teaching. And then when I finished law school, I went into the Army for 26 years as a lawyer. Like the movie A Few Good Men, but I never demanded the truth or anything like that. So I did that for 26 years. And then when I retired in 2015, I had to figure out what I wanted to do because I got bored. In 2 days, I was bored. I was watching Quincy MD on TV Land. And I was like, I cannot do this the rest of my life. So I loved teaching and coaching way back when I was in law school. So I was so lucky because at American University in Washington, D.C., my track coach from 1980 at St. John's was now at American University. So I called him and said, Matt, I'd love to go back into teaching and coaching. So he said, come to American, I'll make you a coach. And then a friend of mine who was a lawyer in the Army was a teacher at AU as an adjunct. And he said, hey, can you sometimes substitute for me because I travel a lot? And I said, of course. And then a job opened up as a professor and I started teaching. So it was like the expression, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So I knew the track coach and I knew a professor and I fell into it. So I absolutely loved teaching and coaching. And my coach, who I've known for 40 years, my track coach at St. John's, we were out one night and he said, you know, we have an obligation when we're older to pass on what we know to people. And he said, I've been to the Olympics. I pass on my running knowledge. You're a lawyer. You're passing on your lawyer knowledge. And I think that's kind of our duty in society is if we know something, we pass it on. So I was going to do a marathon this year. And my nephew said, hey, you should do a TikTok video about getting in shape for a marathon. I was like, I don't even know what TikTok or InstaChat is, but I do know how to write. So I said, I'll do a book about it. So over the summer, I decided to write a book about doing a marathon for every decade since the 70s. I decided to write a book about it with tips for people who may be interested in fitness, not just necessarily the marathon, passing on tips and everything I learned from doing things wrong. So I wrote the book over the course of the summer and it just got published.
Well, wonderful. Because, okay, one, you said a lot of things. How many things can go wrong when you're training for something, right?
Yes.
I mean, we all go through it. We go, oh, we're going to go to the gym 5 nights a week. I haven't been in the gym for 10 years.
Yes. Well, the thing that happens, especially as we get a little bit older, is life happens, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. Now, there's obviously family obligations and also job obligations. So it's at times, you know, especially when I was in the Army, because we deploy at no notice, and that can interfere with, like, if you're training for a marathon and all of a sudden you have to go into the field for a month, that can affect your training. Situations at home, you can also, I mean, during COVID, I'm a teacher, spouse is a teacher. We both had to transition to teaching at home. All that takes a lot of extra effort. So it cuts into your time. So it's, as far as a fitness routine, it almost has to become like brushing your teeth, just something you do every day. And you just have to plan for it. You have to make time for it because it's so easy to put off. I'll admit it. I put off from around March of 2020 till March of 2021. Fitness was on the back burner as we were dealing with everything else. But then I started to realize as I was getting heavier that I need to kind of carve out time to do it every day.
Exactly. We have to, with fitness, you have to take that 30 minutes minimum a day. It doesn't matter where you're carving it out from, but you have to do it for yourself because right. What do we do during 2020 but gain weight?
Yes. And fitness is not just about physical fitness, it's your mental health as well. And actually my homework assignment for all my students this weekend was do something for your mental health. You have to promise me you're going to take a walk or you're going to read, whatever you do for mental health, you need to do that. You have to get away from your tablets, away from your computer, wait for your homework, and go take a walk or something. So fitness is also to unwind because it's mental health is so important as well.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't understand that physical fitness goes with your mental health. You have to have both in balance to be balanced yourself.
Exactly. And physical fitness is great for reducing stress.
Mhm.
When I was an attorney in the Army, I had several clients on death row. I was representing them on death row, and that's very stressful because you're constantly thinking, what can I do for them?
Mhm.
You know, every minute of the day is like, I should be working on their case. And you can't, you will just get burned out. So, every evening I'd go for a run along the Han River. Um, in Seoul, Korea, just to unwind and just forget about things. And my next door neighbor at the time, he was in charge of all the negotiations between the North and the South. He was from South Korea, and he'd be on the elevator with me headed to the river, and he'd hit golf balls at night, and I would run just to unwind. You have to find something to unwind.
Exactly. I mean, I was never military, but my family's all military.
Yes.
So they can tell me, oh, we would play golf, we would go throw the ball around, we'll go run, we'll go to the gym, we'll go to the shooting range just to do something not work related. Well, this
Yes,
translates when you're studying for a career. Doing
exactly.
law classes myself, I can tell you that's not easy. You get
Yes.
burnt out really, really easy, especially when you get into constitutional law.
I just taught that about an hour ago.
I just finished my constitutional classes last year. So,
Yes.
but going through it, I was stressed out, and you have to have this done and this done and this done for your classes, and you're not taking time for yourself.
Exactly.
So, understanding that, and understanding the mindset of a student going through law classes, you have to, regardless of what you're doing, take time for yourself mentally, physically, whatever you're doing, because both will come out in your work.
Exactly. And I tell that to my students all the time. I say, the semester's 14 weeks
Mhm.
and you have to balance these 14 weeks. And I also tell them, listen, my class is not the most important thing in your life. You've got other classes, you've got family members who may need your help, you've got yourself who you have to take care of. So make sure you do everything. Don't focus just on school because you'll be burned out in a month and you're not doing anybody any good.
Exactly. And then to do law classes at night on top of working, you have your
Yes.
family, you have your work, you have your schooling, you have your lessons, then you have to take time to sit back and take 15 minutes to for something for yourself.
Exactly. When I was in law school in the late 80s, everybody in the class had a job. The guy next to him was a New York City cop. The first time I ever saw a gun was in class because he had it on his ankle holster. And the
Mhm.
first night in law school, I looked down and see a gun. And I was like, don't let that thing go off. And then, but there were 60 of us, and everybody had their family as well as law school. There was people during the semester had babies. There were people who changed jobs. So night school is challenging, and our teachers explained that to us. They said, "Listen, we know you have jobs, we know you have families, but remember, you got to take the same bar exam as everybody else. There's not a night school bar exam, day school bar exam."
Right. It's all the same. And
Yes,
regardless of how you learn, it's all the same information. It's how you're learning it and making sure you're taking time to process it, because if you're burnt out, you're not going to process anything.
exactly. And you see that, and that's what I noticed a lot when I went to law school at night. Is we took the same amount of classes as the day students, just over a longer period of time, and they were in the library constantly. I'm like, what are you studying? I mean, I'm going to work all day, and I'm going to school. Then I'm running at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. You're in the library all the time. You're going to be burned out by October, and you see that a lot in law students. Is they just get burned out and they just don't like the reading anymore. They say, I'm overwhelmed with the reading.
Mhm. That's it's not just law students, it's any student at all. You
Exactly.
get to the point where my daughter's in design classes, and she's overwhelmed by how much reading there is, but she loves to read and she's
Yes.
burned out. She loves to do photography. Well, there's a lot of learning to do the technical stuff. You have to read. Well, you have to also take time to do something for yourself.
Exactly. And that's why, one time I was running with my boss in Germany, and he says, because in the military, you have to take a test every 6 months, push-ups, sit-ups, and run. And a lot of people almost do the physical training just to pass that test. And General Ayres said to me, he said, Kevin, the physical training has nothing to do with passing that test. It's for your mental and physical health. And and I remember him telling me one morning at 5 o'clock in the morning that you have to be balanced. If you're not balanced, the house is going to come crumbling down.
Exactly. I mean, we see this when you come, I see a lot of veterans coming back from where they're stationed. It could be anywhere. My family's done this. If they're not balanced, if they're not finding balance, mental, physical, going back to work, whatever it is, they're never balanced. And regardless of what you tell them, they have to find the balance in their life.
Exactly. And coming back actually is an interesting point you bring up, because when you're deployed, you're working 15, 16 hours a day. And then coming home, it's a challenge to not be working 15, 16 hours a day. That almost seems odd to say, because coming home's not like a Lifetime movie where everybody's hugging with tie a yellow ribbon around the tree. You have to get used to being home, and you have to get used to being with your family again. That takes a little bit of time and effort. And you have to really, during that time period, you really need to unwind and start doing things again that you like to do. My friend Ray Jackson, he had been over in Iraq a few times, and every time he'd come back, I would take him to Great Falls Park in Virginia, and we'd run along the Potomac River. And he's like, there's so many leaves. The water sounds so good. I'm like, yes, Ray, you need to do these things to get used to being back home.
Mm-hmm. It is. We look at this as the veterans coming home. It's not a Lifetime movie. I've seen a lot of my family members come back home. I've dealt with family members I haven't seen and then deal with them before they left and then years after they came back. And it's not the same person because they haven't yet adjusted to being home.
Exactly. And the stigma of getting help has been lifted a lot over the past few years. I remember when I was in Germany, General Ham, he was the commander of all of Europe Armed Forces, 4-star general. And he went into the Star Stripes, that's the Army's newspaper, and said, listen, my wife noticed I wasn't the same when I came back, and I'm talking to people about it. And it lifted that stigma, because a lot of times in the military, people think, if I tell somebody I need help, it's a sign of weakness. And so I'm just going to handle it myself. And you can handle it yourself. So the stigma has been raised a lot in the past 10 years where people will seek help, which they probably did not do in the past.
No, they didn't. I can tell you, my dad was a Korean War vet. He didn't seek help until the day he passed away. Yes. But that's the stigma back from then to now. And then you have, my grandparents, grandfathers were both World War II, and it's just, you don't talk about it. Well, now we are talking about it, and we're finding exercising, doing marathons, even if it's the handicap marathon. Yes. You're doing something to be back in the moment.
Exactly. Yes. And it was something we were always attuned to, right before I retired. When somebody was at work and they seemed to be a little bit off, I'd always talk to their supervisor and say, listen, where was he or she? What did they see when they were deployed? We need to talk to that person. So as supervisors, we're always attuned to watch out for signals of people who needed to talk to somebody.
Well, that's awesome. That's being done now.
Yes.
I mean, I can't, like I said, I can't say what happened 30 years ago, but in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of growth. Exactly.
Yes. And it's needed because I think not just in the military, I think in society, people are talking more about mental health. In the elementary schools, social emotional is a big part of the elementary schools because I substitute teach some days at elementary schools. And the schools do a wonderful job now. When I went to school, that was never even talked about. I mean, it was math, English, history, memorize your things, all those kind of things. Now, social emotional is a huge part of the school's curriculum, elementary school, middle school, high school. And this was even before the pandemic that the schools were starting to get involved with the students' social emotional health.
Which is needed. How many times have we seen in the last 10 years of student under the age of 16 commit suicide? This
Exactly.
is why we have put this into teaching now. It's needed.
Exactly.
We cannot let our children continue to be mentally shut down and think that killing themselves at the age of 8 or 9 is acceptable.
Exactly. And it's wonderful that the schools are doing this now at the elementary school level.
Mhm.
So they're learning at age 5 and 6 that it's okay to talk to somebody. Where when I grew up, it was like, you're a boy, don't cry, suck it up, deal with it. And that was back in the 60s and 70s. And now, age 5 and 6, they're learning it's okay to go see the school mental health expert. That's acceptable. Which is wonderful, because then that'll be their mindset the rest of their life.
We have to start young. I say this all the time. We have to start our babies young learning stuff. We
Yes.
want them to learn from 4 to 6 is when they're little sponges. Everything they need to know is going to be taught then. We teach them to talk to people, not be afraid of, what's going on, and open their mouths. They're going to be carrying it into adulthood.
Exactly. Yes.
I talk with my hands a lot, so
That's okay. That's not a problem at all.
But this is things that we are teaching everyone. We teach our military now, coming back, we need to talk to people. We need to go for that run. We need to go for that hike. We need to get in touch with nature. We talk about, let's do our physical health, but physical isn't just physical. Physical is also mental.
Yes. Yes, it's all combined. Especially, I'm very fortunate that I have great trails and rivers to run near.
Mhm.
So when I'm outside in nature, I mean, it's not a chore. I mean, a lot of times people, because growing up, remember, running was punishment.
Mhm.
Like in gym class, if you weren't doing good, go run a lap. So it was kind of seen as punishment. And you also hear people talk, you never hear about somebody going to play a marathon. Like they play tennis, but they don't play a game of marathon. So sometimes running, people think, oh, it's just drudgery, it's boring. But when you're outside in the woods, you forget time, and you just see things. You hear bullfrogs, you hear the woodpeckers in the winter. So you get to actually connect with nature again.
I love being able to travel right now and going to the different parks in different states and seeing and hearing things that I normally wouldn't if I'm just home.
Yes.
And that helps me get back mentally where I need to be, regardless if I'm working on my business, if I'm going to go study today, if whatever I'm doing, taking that hour or 2 hours in nature resets my mindset for everything else.
Exactly. Like this, we just went back this past week to school, and we're online right now. So we had to do the adjustments. We had to adjust from in person in the fall, then pivot this past winter break to online for a couple of weeks. We'll be back in person soon. But there's extra work with online because you have to do all the planning and things like that. And now I'm grading papers again. So sometimes I just got to go to the canal and go run. And then I feel fine after about 30 or 40 minutes.
Exactly. And that's what it is we do the marathons for not only our physical health, but for our mental health. We get called being nuts because we go in 30 degree weather.
Right.
To the parks and go for a hike or a walk or whatever we're doing at the park.
Right.
It's not just because we need to be there for, the beauty, but we're changing our mindset from whatever is going on.
Exactly. Because, when I'm, engaged in school and grading papers and reading emails, it's a lot of stuff. And I cannot be like that when Heather and Cam come home from school. Because he's 11 and he expects me as soon as he comes home from school, he wants a snack. And Heather gets home a little bit later. I got to get dinner ready. So I can't go from wound up with school to all of a sudden giving him pretzels. I need that time in between where I can go exercise. And it doesn't have to be run. A lot of times I'll just go for a walk, down on the C&O Canal, the Chesapeake, Ohio Canal, just go for a walk. And it's that time just away from the computer, away from everything, away from the phone, you can unwind, and then you're ready to, do everything you have to do with your family.
Right. Now that we have the first book out, going into everything you can do wrong getting training, are you going to write a second book?
I'm thinking about it. A lot of my book is not really just about running, because I tie in different stories along the way. A lot about my dad, who did not run, but he kind of motivated us to challenge ourselves. For instance, when I asked him why there was no bridge from Connecticut to Long Island, he said, "We'll find out by swimming it." So me and my brother had to swim 14 miles. Another time when I was watching the Olympics when I was 9, I said, "How is that person running 26 miles?" He said, "Go sign up for a marathon, find out." So he kind of always challenged us. So the book is a lot of the humorous things about him. And he passed away, but my stepmom, she just read it. She said she was crying the whole way because it kept reminding her of different stories. So my whole life, people always said to me, "You should write a book about different things." Either, because I've got a lot of stories about my clients. Some things I can't say because of attorney-client privilege.
Right.
But people always said to me, "You should write a book." So I'm thinking of writing another one just about growing up on Long Island in the 60s, 70s in a family of 10 kids, and
Oh my.
all the yes. So all the funny stories that entails. Timed fire drills in the middle of the night, things my dad had to do. But when he wakes you up at 2 a.m. and you have to climb out a window, you're kind of annoyed. But looking back, he wanted to make sure if there was a problem with the house, we got out okay. So I was thinking about doing one of those because a lot of the book is almost a tribute to my dad in a way, and so I'm thinking about maybe doing another one along those lines.
That I think doing one that has more of your childhood growing up, especially with 10 kids. You don't hear too many families with 10 kids.
Right. But to me, that doesn't seem odd. I mean, maybe because I'm used to it. So I couldn't imagine anything else. I just always imagine lots of people so in our house.
I understand. My fiance has 4 siblings with mom and another 3 siblings with dad. So I'm like, okay, we have lots of people. Where
Yes.
I have my adopted sister, and then I have siblings that were older that I never dealt with.
Yes.
So it's just a mindset of, that's a lot of kids. Well, when you get all together, it doesn't seem like it.
Exactly. I still remember, dinner table. I mean, we had to use picnic benches and things. But that seems normal. And, we had 4 boys in one room, 4 girls in another room, 2 in another room. And now I see, kids like get their own bedroom. And it's like, I couldn't even imagine that.
I'm understanding that because my house that I grew up in was with the house my mother grew up in with 5 kids in the house.
Yes.
So it was a different mindset of me growing up in the same house as her when she had all the siblings home.
Right.
But at the same time, we have fire drills. We have, oh, how do we get out of this window? And then when you're a teenager, oh, I know how to get out of this window.
Yes. Well,
For other reasons.
My dad used to make it a competition. I remember one time my brother jumped out of the 2nd-story window to set the family record. And he landed in our garden. And he said, "Nobody's going to do that faster than me." So we're a very competitive family.
I can't say I would ever jump out of a 2nd-story window, but okay.
Yes. Well, we had a garden down below, and it was kind of soft landing, and he was teeny, so he's fine. But,
that would make a wonderful story in a book someplace,
yes,
because a lot of us don't fathom jumping out of a story window for anything because a lot of us live in apartments or there's concrete down there, not just something soft to land on.
yes.
But at the same time, you go to a different mindset and go, oh, that sounds really awesome, maybe.
Yes. But I'd love to write again. The writing came pretty easily. The book only took me 10 days to write.
Oh, wow.
And that was not 10 full days because I got to take Cam to the pool and things. So it was in the summer. So I'd write about 2 hours in the morning, 5 hours in the afternoon. I did that for 10 straight days, and then it was done. Because I think with my job, I was used to writing. You know,
Mhm.
I one time we wrote 536-page brief for the Supreme Court for a death penalty case. I was used to writing, but I had to kind of change my style. I mean, I had to
Mhm.
go from legalese to something more engaging for the reader. But the
Oh yeah.
actual writing was not that difficult.
Now, when you're doing a 500-page brief, you have to be all technical, all punctuation, everything has to be perfect, every
Yes,
I dotted. When you're writing for someone to read it for enjoyment, your entire style is different.
exactly. So I had to take out all the legalese.
Mhm.
And I think the first draft was a little bit too dense and I had to kind of power down a little bit on it.
But that's okay. You're
Yes,
learning your voice as an author versus your voice as a lawyer.
exactly. Yes.
And there are a lot of lawyers that go back and forth. Now, you're doing a nonfiction book. Now, if imagine going to do a fictional book, you would have to change that completely different.
Yes. I once, actually in law school, I had thought about doing a fictional book and I got about a page because I really hadn't thought through the whole
Mhm.
process. Plus, law school and working was a lot.
Yeah,
But I was just so happy to be able to write this summer because I would think about it the night before and then put my fingers on the keypad pad the next morning.
that's the best way to do it. I mean, I thought I was good at writing a book in 30, but you wrote yours in 10, so I
Yes.
give you props on that.
Oh, thank you.
But we have these books out. What is the name of the book? I
The
don't think.
book is called Going the Distance, Tales and Tips from 6 Decades of Marathons. And
It's a
it's
mouthful.
and what I did was because I've done a marathon in every decade
Mhm.
since the 70s.
Mhm.
I had kind of stopped in the 2010s. And then in March of 2020, before the pandemic, I was going for a walk with Cam, and he was 9 at the time. And he was kind of asking questions about, hey, how far are we going to walk? How far can people walk? Because they're at that age where they're looking at the world bigger. So I said, well, I did this thing called a marathon. He started talking to me. And he goes, hey, you did one in every decade. You have to do one in the 2020s. So I was like, oh, so I had to kind of get in shape to do another one. So in the book, I focused on one marathon per decade to kind of talk about the, what the race was like, how the marathon has changed over the years from the 1970s when it was $2 to enter a marathon. The medal was about the size of a quarter. Now it's $200 to enter a marathon. There's 30,000 people. You get a mega medal. So I kind of talked how the marathon has changed. And I picked one marathon per decade to kind of talk about the marathon itself, like what the city of Seoul was like, what the city of Honolulu was like, kind of a tour guide as well. And I kind of wrote it in the style of Bryson's Walk in the Woods,
Mhm.
kind of when he talked about the Appalachian Trail and kind of overestimated it. So I talk about sometimes when I've kind of overestimated the marathon. And then for the cover, I got a character artist to kind of make it a funny picture instead of just a bland picture of running. I don't know if this shows up on. This is Going the
Oh yeah.
Distance, and
Well,
that's my
absolutely.
dad and me, and that's in 1970, and my dad handing me a can of Coke because back then there was no such thing as Gatorade. So he gave
Right.
me Coca-Cola. That was the hydration back then. So the book kind of traces how the marathon's changed. And it's not like Dirty Dancing. At the end of Dirty Dancing, they're all sad that everything changed.
Mhm.
Here, saying it's changed, but it was good then, it's good now. Things change in life. You can't say it was so much better back then because then your life's going to be miserable today. You have to adjust as the world changes.
Mhm. Change happens every day and every aspect of life, regardless if we want it to or not. We can't
Yes.
say, oh, it was better here than it is here. There's
Right.
some things that are better in the past only because that's how we perceive them.
Exactly. So you have to every single morning you have to wake up and say this is going to be the best day ever. You can't live in the past. Now, you had a great time in the past, you have great memories, but they're over. You have to move forward.
Yesterday is gone. Today is a new day. You can't live your life for yesterday.
Exactly.
You can't live your life worrying about the test that you might have failed 3 days ago and you're waiting for the grade.
Exactly. I always tell my students, I say, there's certain things you can control, certain things you can't control. So just worry about what you can control. And I always use the expression, stay in your lane. When you're driving a car, you worry about what's in your lane. You don't worry about every other, you got to keep an eye on the other lanes, but you have to focus driving in your lane. Don't worry about, the other cars, unless they're going to hit you, but focus on your lane.
Yeah, we only worry about the cars, what they're doing, if it's something, an immediate danger to you.
Yes,
Other
exactly.
than that, you don't have to worry about what Sally's doing over here or what Jimmy's doing over there.
Exactly. And even and I noticed that when I substitute teach at elementary school, I mean, the kids love to say, well, Sally, she's not doing this right. She's using a red crayon instead of a blue. I'm like, okay, Susan, focus on your coloring and we'll let Sally worry about her coloring.
Yeah, as a mother, when my daughter was in school, I actually had an argument with the teacher because my daughter used a red pencil to fill in the answers instead of a regular pencil. I'm like,
Yes.
wait, is the answers right? We had an argument over,
Yes,
are the answers right? I don't care what you wrote in. Are the answers right?
exactly. Yes. A form over substance.
Yes. I'm like, I don't care what she wrote in.
Yes.
Why do I have to say, here's a pencil? You told her to use a pencil. She technically did.
Right.
So.
And the other thing I loved about my book, because it goes back so many years, and it's relatable to every age group, because it's got, if you're a high school runner, it can give you tips for high school, if you're a college runner, or if you're an older runner. But I've been able to reconnect with so many people, because people said, because Facebook is wonderful now. So, I told my high school Facebook page, hey, I have this book out, these different groups. And also people I hadn't heard from years. Hey, how you doing? Tell me what's happening in your life. So it was also a chance to reconnect with people, because moving around for 30 years in the Army, you meet wonderful people.
But you can't connect.
Exactly. And especially, there's some people who live in their hometown and that's wonderful. But I left my hometown to go in the Army, but now I've been able to reconnect with people I went to high school with and things like that.
Yes, that is one thing when you become an author or you connect on social medias, that you get to connect with everyone from your past, and it's wonderful.
Yes.
Or you can just say, I don't want to talk to you, and there's a little button that's called block.
Yes. But sometimes when you write a book about yourself, you're a little bit vulnerable, and you're opening yourself up. And sometimes I was concerned about that a little bit. Because you're telling some kind of personal things about yourself, or about, now I made sure, I would mention my family, but always in a positive light.
Yeah.
But you open yourself up. Like, I talk about, the first time I got drunk in high school.
Oops.
After my marathon and stuff. But you open yourself up, and now people read that stuff. So you just have to be aware that when you write about yourself, you're opening the door and people can see things.
Very true. But with that in mind, where can our audience find you?
Oh, my book is on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And those are the two places it is right now. And my plan is also to, I'm going to be going and talking at marathon expos. Like when there's a marathon beforehand, they have an expo where you have to get your number. They have speakers and they have different products for sale. So I'll be going around to marathon expos speaking, and also have my book there as well. But Amazon and Barnes and Noble right now.
Awesome. It was so good having you on the show today.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
And thank you very much for your service.
Well, thank you.
And for all of our listeners and our viewers, happy reading.